Good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and call this council budget work session together in order. And Mr. County Executive, before I give you the floor, I'd like to take a minute to let everyone know that Councilman Jan Giordano will not be with us this morning. He's been in the hospital for several days. This morning, he's undergoing surgery on his back, and just want to wish him a speedy and safe recovery. So with that, I guess Mr. Boniface or County Executive, whichever one you want to start.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Good to see everyone this morning. These are different times, and I want to thank the council for adjusting and keeping the public business moving. I think you've all probably had an opportunity to see my video, which I normally give you in person over at the council office. But I did want to just kind of walk through the high points. As you know, my budget was really about drafted when the governor placed the state of emergency in effect in Harper County, and the rest of the state began to receive some of the COVID-19 cases. And as we saw at the beginning of the pandemic, move to Harper County. So right away, I think some of the early projections, as soon as we found out the economy was going to be shut down, I went back to the budget and made a second round of cuts. Early on, I mean, some of it's just predicting what could happen. As we know, things change day to day. It wasn't until about a month later that Comptroller Francho began to give us some estimates. I know Robbie and my staff have been tracking jobless claims and some of these other indicators. It's just too early to tell really what the full impact will be. We know that we operate on property tax and income tax mainly. We don't get a lot of state support. And so we're going to keep tracking those two items. And so I based this budget, as I said in the video, really on public safety, education, and taking care of our own employees. And by doing that, you'll see that the Board of Ed budget is fully funded. I did think it was a reasonable request at around 5% growth. I did lean a little bit to give them full funding in light of the fact that they may need to use some of that money for technology in one of their categories. That will give them some flexibility to do that. We also took care of our first responders. When you go and take a look at the fire departments, we took care of most of their requests, firmed up the foundation, and finished moving forward with that final crew of the county EMS service. On law enforcement, we took care of the sheriff's budget. Our deputies, we kept our word and gave them the second phase of their pay plan. And in addition to that, we did have to cut some of the sheriff's capital. We kept his technology request in the budget, but some of the other items we've had to push off on the capital side. You'll see that the capital side is down, and we had to push back and cut several proposals out of the capital budget. And I would say we're going to keep an eye on that as we move forward in the first 6 months of the next year, whether in fact we move. Listen, I don't want to move forward on projects if I think things are going to go bad. We may not move forward on some projects, so we have some cushion left in the budget. So we're just going to have to kind of watch that as we go forward. We took care of our county employees with the 2+2 program that I did a couple of years ago that gives a 2% COLA. It also does provide a $2,000 merit-based increase. I like that approach because the majority of our employees are in the middle or lower, and this gives them a higher percentage of increase. And I think that was one of my commitments to some of the associations to make sure that we begin to take care of some of the lower scaled employees. And then if you go to education, you'll see that I would still, one slide I'd like you to, when you're talking to state officials, I always bring this up, but well, we still fund the local school system about 2 to 1 on county funds as opposed to state funds, and I think that's important. For the volunteer fire companies, we did a 3% cost of living increase for them. I think that'll be important this year. They're going to be slight on their fundraising because of the COVID. You've got a bill for you increasing the LoSAP maximum amount and a monthly amount. They're our first responders. They're on the front line of this thing. And so I think it's important this year to do that. And on the capital side, we funded their maintenance repairs, their safety equipment, and so they should be pretty solid for this year. I think as we go into later this year, we'll have to keep an eye on them to see how bad their fundraising falls off for some of them, and we'll keep an eye on that as we go through. Capital for education, we've got about $24 million in there. In addition to fully funding the operational side, I did put an extra $1 million into the blended learning technology for the board to give them some extra flexibility. Roof replacements, we funded all of our state matches. Modernization of Jopletown High School was funded. 14 education special ed buses are the ones that are required to be replaced. And the board's number one priority, the special education facility improvements, we've also funded in addition to that. And you'll see a few, there were some, like what I call life safety, some fire alarms, communication equipment that I picked out and funded down through the capital budget. And then the only real other capital I did was Aberdeen Fire Company. They were 500 short on their capital project that we did last year. So I did fund that, but that's about it on that. We swept as much of the capital cash as we could. The rest is on the capital, our roads and bridges, stormwater, all those things that we're looking at. When you look at some of those capital projects, you'll also see $1.4 million in there for the Chesapeake Center. We'll keep an eye on that one. Sooner or later, the governor and the Board of Public Works is going to have to start making some cuts. I'm sure the community colleges are probably going to take some reductions. So we'll keep an eye on that. We may not have to spend that if that project gets pushed back at the state level. And so the other things we'll keep an eye on, county roads and bridges, they don't give us a lot of our highway user funds back. That may be an area that the state could cut. There's not too much else they can cut. They can reduce education aid, and that is something that could happen too. If the state gets into this 2.8 area, $2.8 billion that they've got to find, there could be some drastic reductions. The only other thing I think they could do to us is have us pick up more of the teacher pensions. So the real problem is not them taking cash from us. It's going to be them making us pick up more so they can cover their losses. And we're just going to have to really keep a close eye on that. But at the end of the day, the budget still keeps about a $20 million reserve, which I like to have. So we're going to go into this budget at not a weaker position. We're just going to have to watch our jobless claims and income tax reductions. And we feel like we're prepared and we've got room in the budget if we have to come and address that at a later time. So, Mr. President, with that, I'd be glad to answer some questions. And you got my number and my email. If something comes up that you need in between, if something comes up, I don't mind you calling me or sending me email, and I can track down specifics, as well as Kim or Billy or Robbie. But we feel it's a pretty solid budget. We did have to push off some things, but I feel better pushing it off and conserving any cash that we could before we go into the next budget.
Well, first of all, let me congratulate you on the budget that you put forward. And then also, I do want to thank you for having the availability for me to contact you with a question. It seems like we've talked quite a bit over the last few weeks throughout the COVID pandemic, and I appreciate that very much. One quick question for me, though, and maybe it's a question for Robbie or Mr. Boniface or Kim, actually. When do you think we'll start seeing any type of, or when we can really track a significant reduction in revenue? At what point?
Yeah, and Robbie can explain that. There is a little bit of a staggered effect to that, but
yeah. So it'll again, we're fortunate in that our mix, as opposed to the state, which is sales tax and income tax, that our mix is largely income tax and property tax. And kind of the way all of this has occurred, we've already had most of our distributions we've already had about half of our distributions for income tax come in. And of course, in the property taxes for next year, we're already due on December 31st. So from a timing perspective, we're better there. We will receive a income tax distribution for the first quarter that's withholding and estimated payments from January, February, and March after the budget's pretty much adopted. So that's Memorial Day, around Memorial Day. I think that should be largely okay, though, because again, the pandemic really didn't begin in earnest until kind of the last week or two, as far as the economic shutdown goes, until the last week or two of that quarter. There may be some noise that occurs because some individuals, some smaller companies may not have turned in their withholding, and so some of that might get pushed to a subsequent quarter. But Maryland is very fortunate in that most of our withholding comes, I believe, from about like 600 filers, a large number of whom are government entities and other large organizations. So that should be relatively stable. The next income tax distribution comes in the second quarter, and that's April, May, and June. That'll come in June, July, and August. Again, we think that there should be a solid foundation of the withholding there to kind of keep it from truly collapsing or anything. But again, there's going to be a lot of noise in there. Some of this will have to do how the state formula works, as well as the money that comes in. I think another thing to keep in mind is that a lot of people now are on unemployment, but unemployment is taxable. So to some extent, if you lost your position, but then it was covered up by either Payroll Protection Act or unemployment insurance, we shouldn't see as much of that hit there. So it is going to take some time. I think with the estimated payments, again, stock market losses, things like that is probably where we'll see some of it. But we're going to be better off, I think, than a lot of the other jurisdictions. If you look at some of these other jurisdictions, even the other local jurisdictions, they rely much more heavily on, say, things like hotel tax, parking taxes, parking meters, all of those things. And for us, they're either very, very limited or they're for specific spending. So I think that we should again be able to weather this storm, but it is going to take a while for it to all shake out, and for us to really truly know the true impact and how much of it is economic loss and how much of it is kind of temporary disruption timing, if you will.
And Mr. President, I've been working the last 2 days, and we're working with the CARES Act. Some of this federal money that we have to apply for, some for expenditures, some for business help and things like that. We're tracking language in Congress that could give state and local governments some flexibility to use that for lost revenue. So we'll continue to track that. And I know the governor's already looking for revenue. I wouldn't count on that at this point. What we're hearing is, in fact, the Senate and the president want these states to reopen, so they're not going to necessarily throw out more money to cover state revenue loss or locals. As you can imagine, they've already doubled the debt kind of overnight with the first two stimulus packages. So we'll watch that, and we've already talked to the governor's staff about how that might work and how we could maybe cover some revenue loss there. Hotel tax there's no doubt that our nonprofits should be in a mode of constricting. There is no doubt that that is going to be way down, and thus there's going to be an impact on their grants. So that is going to be unavoidable. The hotel tax, as you know, is a pass-through. It's just collected and sent to the county. So we expect that to be way down. And so spending on that is going to be curtailed. There's just no way around it.
Thank you, Mr. Executive. Council, at this time, any of you have questions?
Mr. President.
Mr. Woods?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, County Executive, and thank you, your team. I'm going through the budget. I was just blown away with all the funding you've put in for education and public safety. I'm hoping the fire departments and everyone in public safety recognizes that you guys went out of your way this time. So, as you normally do too, but you really added to it this go around. So, thank you.
Thanks. We, particularly right now, those folks, as you know, we weren't, Councilman, we don't really have a line item to do hazard pay or to pay like our employees, fire, EMS, our law enforcement folks extra. So part of my envisioning and taking care of them with the wage package is to reward them too for, putting themselves out there on the front line. And I've tried to tell my employees, the deputies, everyone that, this is built into that is my appreciation for their hazard that they carried on. And even our county employees, I've gotten compliments throughout the state that our inspections, permits, all our departments have not missed a beat. And a lot of them are telecommuting, and we've got different shifts coming in and out. But inspections, everything has not missed a beat through our digital platform that you helped us invest in over the last few years. And being flexible, using an iPad to inspect something, take a picture, and I appreciate that. And I think the council president has helped me to make sure the health department is still, operating as best they can to get septics done, perks done, to keep what industry we do have working here in the county, keeping that moving. So we appreciate that, and we're talked about in Annapolis as one of the counties that has less dysfunction than any other jurisdiction in the state, that we're still kind of hitting on all cylinders.
Thank you, Mr. Executive. And I will say that I received another report from the health department this morning that they continue to work with all of our businesses to make sure that they put a strong emphasis while being open on the public health and safety and well-being of their employees and their customers. So things still continue to move smoothly. Anyone else? Questions with the county executive? Mr. Schroeds?
Yes, I just want to thank you for the education budget. I was also very impressed with the land preservation that you have put in this budget. I think that now is a great time to invest in those. I don't think farmland especially is going to be any cheaper. And I think with the pending re-ranking bill, I feel that it should help distribute more fairly around the county in other areas, some preservation. So I thank you for that. And of course, I was a county employee. I still have many friends across the street on your side, and I appreciate you taking care of them. And I know that this is, every year you've been in there, you've been doing that. So thank you for that.
And Councilman, we agree with you. We think, unfortunately, sometimes during a downturn in the economy, and of course our land preservation funds are dedicated, but a downturn sometimes helps us go out and some folks are more receptive to, the offers and land preservation when the economy is not as good. And we want to be in a position to take advantage of that maybe and get some of these properties that maybe 2 years ago they were saying no to, but now we may have a shot at them. So we appreciate your help on that also.
Right.
I would just, I believe this budget is strong and positive, and we have the reserves, a rainy day, and we're in a strong fiscal position because we have been conservative for the last 5 years. And I've talked to Dr. Bolson. I still stress that we're going to move ahead with our employees and stuff, but we are going to be very careful on expenditures, moving on projects, as we all keep our other eye on the economy. I've also asked Dr. Bolson to be as conservative as well. I do believe that if he can find savings and continue to build back his fund balance, it will put us in a safer position next year. And I think everyone should always keep that in the back of their mind, that this is a progressive, good, strong budget. But in the back of our mind, I still kind of operate the way I do at home. Don't spend it just because you have it. If we can conserve some funds, because there is a possibility next year we could be in a bad spot if this shutdown, I think, drags on later than mid-June. I'm hoping we open by mid-May, but if we go any later, I think then it gets pretty perilous for all local governments and the state.
Thank you, Mr. Schroeds. Anyone else? Mr. Wagner, unmute your mic.
We're there. Good morning, all.
Morning.
County Executive, I don't envy your position trying to put together a budget that carries us through the next year and further than that with the things that we've got looming out there and the uncertainties that we have. And, to that end, I will commend you as well as my other fellow council members that you've done a good job of certainly supporting all the things that we need to, even though chances are our priorities would have been just a little bit different than what your budget shows. Just a couple of things, and I'm not being critical of it, don't get me wrong. I'm just looking at some ways that I would have shifted some funds and done something different. But what I guess I'm asking is, there was two questions I had that jumped out. The Washington Court access road that shows $2.1 million. Can you tell me what that is?
I think that's a project we have had down there in Edgewood that's been on there on that property. It's an area that the county owns that we've had there in case we find a good partner to go in there, that someday we could put a road in there for access.
Basically, is it to support the
highway funds?
Yeah. So this project's been on the books quite some time. The Washington Court, as everybody is familiar with, that we just entered into council approved surplusing to Copper Mine to move forward with a sports field facility. This road has been part of the plan to open that property up for some time. We put it off because we hadn't had a partner for that site approach us. We're figuring if we move forward, if Copper Mine moves forward, which is not a guarantee, especially in the current climate that we're in, that this will alleviate some of the traffic concerns of bringing in that sports tourism into that area. So we decided to go ahead and put that into the budget. But again, if there are significant reductions to the highway user revenue that we received from the state, was approximately $3 million last year, that would more than likely be one of the first projects that would be cut. But and it's contingent upon whether Copper Mine moves forward. But ultimately, if we were to secure any partner on that site, that road will be key to alleviate the impact on the community.
Mr. Holder, I misspoke too. That it's in the highway, but it is bond money. It's not cash.
And that was in bond money that's in the upcoming sale?
No, that, remember when we use some of that highway user money from the state, since it's so little, we leverage that with bond money. On a lot of our road projects to keep the contractors repaving, safety spot improvements. So a lot of that, when you look through our road budget, a lot of that is supplemented with bond money. Paid for with the state HUR funds.
Yeah, state and the other dedicated revenues that are only in the highways fund. But as far as, it won't be it's not part of this upcoming bond sale. As we talked about before, for the most part, we don't sell the bonds until we actually spend the money, in which case, so even under the best circumstances, you would probably be looking at something that these bonds wouldn't be sold for 2 years. So, but this provides the appropriation authority to do that, and then the ability to sell those bonds at a later date. But it would not have an immediate fiscal impact as far as a cash impact for this year or next year, obviously not until the following year out of the best.
Okay, thank you. Just 2 more points. One being, as we move forward, since we've got such an abbreviated way of having to deal with things right now, how's the best way for council members to get their questions answered as we go through and scour through this budget and come up with issues that we feel that are important to get answered?
Well, what I'd like you to do is to send all your questions to one of the 3 of us or all of us. We more than likely at the end of each day will be able to answer most of those questions. We'll get back as soon as possible. I do encourage the council to utilize the county auditor. She has developed great relationships with our budget office, and she can assist you in interpreting whatever information we send back. If you do have a request for an additional appropriation, of course, you might as well call the boss, because he's the one who's going to have to approve that. So, but I'm available as always. I would ask that you don't send your questions to the department heads, because quite frankly, they just are getting this budget as you are. And a lot of them are trying to figure out what their directions and directives have been set from the county executive. So
Thank you for making that clear as to who we have to send our request to. And that was a good segue there, Mr. Boniface.
You can always call me too, Rob. Yeah, Rob, you're always welcome to call or email me.
I appreciate that. And that brings me to my last point being, and you know what it is, don't you? Down the Aberdeen way.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you could possibly find 500,000 in there to put in towards this year, because I know Aberdeen made the commitment they did, and we would really like to see that move ahead if we could in this upcoming year.
Yeah, I know they would. And that was it was in the budget, and I've told them last year that my commitment was to get it done. Contingent. I always, as you know, Rob, we go budget to budget, so I never make any promises beyond one fiscal year, because like you, I've been around long enough to know stuff goes south just like it did this year. But I've moved a lot of projects. I didn't cut them. I pushed them back a year. And quite frankly, I don't know, based on where we're at, whether even next year. I'm also worried about going to the bond market next year until we find out how this economy rigs out. So I think they made a good investment on that property. We're going to get it done. But I had to push. It's just I had to find savings and push back on the budgets. And it's never easy. A lot of my Parks and Rec stuff, a lot of the stuff I wanted to go and get done, I had to push back too. So, I can't. It is what it is.
It is. As we look through this, if you would just keep an eye on that and see if there's some place we could possibly free up that kind of a number, that would be great to let them attempt to move ahead on the project they've been waiting for some time. I'd appreciate it.
I'll tell them you fought like a tiger.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Anyone else? Mr. Beulah.
I'm not kidding. The reason I say that is President Miller used to always tease me. I'd come in begging and telling him I needed this and that. He goes, "Well, you can't have it, but I'll tell everybody you fought like a tiger." That's what it is. That was before
Bueller.
the Tiger King became famous.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning to all. I too would like to thank the county executive for this budget. As far as I'm concerned, this is probably the best budget since I've been on the council. And thank you for your commitment to public education, safety, as well to the county employees. And that's the first question I have. If you could explain, because I've received several calls regarding, shall we say, the 2+2. Is this going to apply? How is this going to apply? Is it going to apply equally to all employees? Could you dig a little deeper and explain that for our audience at home, please?
It's a program, HR sent out recently an interpretation of how it goes to all employees.
Right.
At the boss, but if you are there's certain situations that exist that you would not receive, everybody's going to receive the COLA.
Mm-hmm.
COLA goes to all employees, but the merit only goes if you have completed all of your requirements, your probation, that you're not on a PIP, and then you have to be at least a 30-hour-a-week employee in order to receive this. We don't give it to our part-time employees, like the summer help that we hired to do the parks and so forth. So these are only the full-time employees that we get that. We interpret full-time as at least 30 hours a week.
Okay, you said HR sent that out. Could I possibly have that and maybe send to all my councilmen if they would like, fellow council members?
Let you know what goes on that.
Yeah,
So
I think I did that my second year or third year. We've done that one other time.
I just want to make sure I have the full understanding of it, exactly who's going to receive it and all that good stuff. Second question, we talked about our concerns going forward, and I know it's a little early. Well, we don't know what's going to happen as far as the economy and everything. Now, we know that hotel tax revenue is going to be way down, which is going to affect our nonprofits in a big way. Have you given any thought to possibly helping them out in other ways? Because they could see as much as a 50-60% cut, and or even more. I don't know. We don't know yet. Is there any plans or any thoughts to kind of help the nonprofits out?
We're looking at that. Right now, the CARES Act, the one that qualifies for us, the first one, counties over 500,000 went directly to the Treasury. Counties under 500,000 in Maryland had to go to the governor's office. That right now, that does not revenue loss is not qualified for distribution. I would say that is changing, and even as late as last night or so, they looked at some language to add flexibility for counties on their second installment. The first installment is going to go for COVID reimbursement, which is our PPE expenses. There's some we're going to let the municipalities supply cleaning, all that stuff directly related to COVID. The second half of funding, we can look at business assistance, other expenses. But right now, revenue loss is not a qualifying thing. The nonprofits, their hotel tax. I'm worried that state programs, if they receive state funding, they could all. The state is the one that's going to get killed on the sales tax, so they're going to have to do that. So what I can tell you is we're watching the CARES Act to see what flexibility we have. Right now, we're I like to call it a pause. We're on a pause button. I don't want to commit to spending money we don't have. And we are also in a savings mode. So we've got to be careful also not to overextend. And so the best I can tell you is we're going to keep an eye on that. If something develops where I am able to get some flexibility to help out, but I don't know if it's went out yet, but I've instructed Len and some of my folks to make sure we reach out to all the nonprofits, especially ones that receive hotel grants from us to begin to be prepared for those, reductions of as much as 50%. And so they need to be prepared for that. They're going to have to pull back, and we're just going to have to ride this out for the time being.
Okay.
It's tough. It'll be tough on nonprofits, and just as it is for restaurants, catering halls. I think if we do come back, we're going to still do social distancing, and probably crowds are going to be not permitted for a good while, and so it may be a slow climb out of this.
Oh, I think it will be. Okay. Again, I just want to thank you for the budget and your commitment to public safety and education. Very good budget. Good job. And as Councilman Wagner stated, I do not envy your position at all because, as you know, I'm a financial advisor, and I don't see this being a V-shaped recovery. A lot of the analysts are, initially that's what they're saying. But thank you again. And that's all, Mr. President, I have at this time.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Beulah. Mr. Johnson?
Council President, good morning, County Executive and all. County Executive, I just have a question about. Well, first, let me commend you on the budget as far as the schools and public safety and the fire service. I think that you've done an outstanding job looking at the budget and understanding where our priorities are in this economic downturn that we're in right now. So, I truly appreciate and commend, and I know the citizens of the county do as well. Just one thing, could your office send over a list of the contribution lists that you give out to the county?
Sure. We always do that. Be glad to.
Okay, because I see there's $254,000 that was given to the, I guess, the Ag Award Program, and it's supported by the hotel tax. And I was wondering, the county auditor said that at least $75,000, I believe, is used, or $75,000 is never used. So I would like to see where that money is going and where how that money is used. So if you could send that over, I would be appreciative.
Sure, no problem. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I believe that's all of our council members. I don't know if any of the citizen budget advisors have any quick questions. I don't see any messages. So, Mr. County Executive, I know you have a very tight schedule, so I appreciate you making time for us this morning. I hope you continue to be safe and healthy, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Mr. President, you want me to real quickly on my budget? It's pretty much just the wage package. On the changes in the county exec, my line item is pretty much just it's just the wage. It's just the wage package increase.
And I thought we pretty well spoke to that, but if anyone has any more questions for the county executive. All right, seeing none. Thank you very much. And with that, I guess we'll turn it over to Mr. Boniface.
Well, you're going to have the spending affordability committee chair call in.
I believe so, yes.
So Mila, I guess that's you.
Is that Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I see him tuned in. So Mr. Kelly, are you available to speak?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. Thank you.
Oh, great. Okay. This is quite a learning experience for me here.
For all of us, sir, for all of us.
I'm sure. How many times have we all said that? Well, anyway, thank you very much for the opportunity to present the annual report of the Spending Affordability Advisory Committee. As many of you know, our group is charged with presenting to the Executive and Council our recommended level of operating spending, recommended level of new debt, and a recommended level of unappropriated fund balance or retained earnings. Meeting between January and March, the majority of our time is spent on determining the level of spending of operating funds that we believe will be available for use by the county in the coming fiscal year. To achieve our mission, we work to determine the level of income tax revenues and real estate tax revenues that will be received in that fiscal year. While there are other components of operating funds, these two categories historically account for about 90% of the operating funds. We assume the other revenues will mirror the change occurring in income and real estate taxes. While our official charge has been to recommend a level of operating spending, the committee has historically used a budget-based approach for our estimate of spending affordability. This approach estimates a revenue level that will become available to the county, assuming no changes in tax rates, fees, or government spending other than those already enacted. This contrasts somewhat with other spending affordability approaches used in other jurisdictions, which determine spending levels tied to citizens' ability to pay. As in past years, and using various tools available to us, we determine income tax levels based upon the economic conditions in calendar year 2019 and attempt to project those of calendar year 2020. Taxes paid from 2020 will be the vast majority of the income tax revenue the county receives in fiscal year 21. Real estate taxes are determined based upon information received from the state and our county treasurer. Since real estate value is assessed by the state and then implemented over 3 years, we have a fairly accurate level of taxable value. Since we know the tax rate and the value, the projection for real estate income is reasonably accurate. The committee projected out the remainder of this fiscal year 20 and determined the adjusted fund budget for this year to be $571.1 million after adjusting for $17.4 million in appropriated fund balance and other one-time revenues. We believe the county net adjusted general fund budget will increase by 6.05%, which means the county estimated revenue available for fiscal 2021 to be $609.9 million. Now, I'd like to kind of mark that for a second, and I'll come back to that given the current state of affairs. When considering all this, the committee noted several items. First off, a continuous of the AAA rating from the county, from the three major rating agencies. I mean, that's just excellent. I think it's going to serve us well in all of this. Secondly, the real estate taxes are estimated to increase by 2.6% in fiscal year 2021. And so real estate values continue to show modest improvements. That said, I think it's probably good just to run through a couple issues with the coronavirus, and also bear in mind in this whole report, our last meeting was toward the end of March, I guess the third week of March, as all this was really starting to unfold. So it's highly important to everybody to recognize that I think you're going to have an awful lot of reliance on the finance group and Robbie and his team and all of them to just really keep apprised of all this, because there's so many things changing. Right now, for example, we are in an incredibly low interest rate environment again. That's going to impact the county's investable balances, which it typically has a lot of cash, certainly early on in the tax year. And that can cut both ways. One, your investment income's down, but also your ability to refi may be able to, some of your debt or any new debt you have may be able to be done at a lower rate. Maybe not. It just depends on the bond markets. Tax revenue implications based on our projections obviously could very well be impacted. A lot of what you'll get in fiscal year 2021 is the result of what happened in the calendar year 2019, but so many things are happening so severely, I can't help but think that it might bleed into your fiscal year 2021. you're in a situation where we haven't seen oil prices, petroleum prices this low. I don't know, since the 80s, the 70s. I don't know. It's incredibly low. Are there things you can do that may help you in whatever spending you have with regard to fuel costs? And the other thing that's really going to impact tax revenue, which is also very unpredictable at this moment in time, you've got a tremendous fluctuation in the stock markets and in the financial markets. What that means is there could be quite substantial tax losses or investment losses that can translate into deductions for people's income, which I've been on this committee since the mid 90s, and we had a turn when the tech bubble popped. We got hit fairly heavily in revenues because of all the capital losses that people experienced in their stock portfolios. So these are things, among others, that you need to keep really actively abreast of. The committee continues to agree with the current debt policy and appropriated fund balance level of the county. The committee devoted time to discussing debt policy and planned debt issuance. While we do not feel qualified to advise the county on debt issuance, we reviewed the county's debt management policy, discussed the plan with the county management team and the county financial advisor, and we concluded the debt policy and expected debt load of the county are reasonable at this time. We applied the metrics described in the policy and compared them to the actual and planned debt position of the county. The county is in conformity with its other debt management policies. The county cannot complete its task without expressing its sincere appreciation to all county employees who assisted the committee in this endeavor. Particularly, the committee wishes to thank Billy Boniface, the county administrator, Robbie Sandless, treasurer, Rick Harness, deputy county treasurer, Kim Spence, chief budget and management research, and her staff for their efforts in providing estimates and historical revenue data, and for their careful and detailed explanation of the county budgeting structure. The committee received valuable insight from Paul Lauder, director of DILP, Brad Killian, deputy director of community and economic planning and zoning, Len Parrish, director of community and economic development, and Steve Overbay, deputy director of community and economic development. The committee also wishes to thank Sharon Ballweg and for her efforts in coordinating the committee's meetings and providing staff support. And I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Council, at this time, any questions for Mr. Kelly? Mr. Kelly, I see no questions, so I appreciate your report. Thank you for all that you do in support of Harford County.
Thank you.
Mr. Boniface.
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. First of all, before I open up for questions on the director's budget and my divisions directly under me, I'd like to, while we're not hearing during these budget work sessions from all the department heads, I'd like to thank all 13 department heads that I work with and the 2 division chiefs. As you can realize, this has been a very big challenge for us over the last 6 weeks in dealing with following out the directives of the county executive who's listening to the governor. And, I commend them. They've been very proactive in meeting those directives. But, I really commend them because the welfare of the 960-some employees that we take care of each day, they put their welfare first. We've got approximately 400 on teleworking, others rotating in and out. So we've had to be very creative. We were moving forward in the direction of doing more with technology to allow us to do more permitting, using teleworking better to be more efficient. And we were going to stage that, introducing a lot of those endeavors, but we kind of had to throw everything into the fire at once, and it's been working very well. So I commend them, and you will be hearing from some of them. And with that, I will open up for any questions that you may have directly on my budget, the Director of Administration's office, and the two divisions that serve within that.
First off, Mr. Boniface, I want to thank you and the entire IT division for helping us to be able to deliver these meetings in a virtual format. As you know, we've not done this before, and each one that we do seems to flow much better and more professional. And I want to thank you and everyone, Nick Kuba, Brian Sill, George Bierman, all the guys that continue to help us bring these forward. So with that, Council, any questions of Mr. Boniface? The one question I have, I see in your administration budget that there's been a reduction, a significant reduction, and I was just wondering if you could speak to that and give us an idea of how that came to be.
Well, you'll see that as a common theme throughout, so I'll let Mr. Samuels explain why we are moving that direction.
So there's the Accounting Standards Board, GASB, the Government Accounting Standards Board, that each year likes to make life a little bit more difficult on government finance professionals. It's also the Accounting Full Employment Act. And so their latest pronouncement is they want to start capturing leases. Because the idea is that leases are kind of like an obligation in the same way that, say, like a bond is an obligation or this. Because a lot of times, like, you'll have a lease, and even if it just states that there is multiple years of renewal, they want to start viewing that to the investment public and to the people who read the financial statements, that this is like an obligation that the county has. And so part of that effort is that, we need to start kind of tracking the leases in a different way. So we've created a capital project that kind of like shows that would provide the appropriation authority for the full value of the lease. So like the full value of the multi-year lease. But as far as the annual expenditure, that's just like whatever the lease costs that year. We've moved that from the agency budgets into debt service. And it's all about trying to just create a way that it's easier to track all of these. It's easier to just track all of these things that we need to do for our financial reporting. So it's largely kind of a budget neutral. You're kind of moving expenses that were here, and then you're moving them to a different pot. And then on the capital side, we're kind of just showing the value of it. And again, it would be a lot like bonds, whereby you have bonds that show up in the capital project, in this case it's leases, and then you have the debt service that shows up in debt service, or in this case, the lease payment.
So it's not a reduction in liability. We still have that. It's just transferred into another department.
Yeah, it's just a question of moving it from different buckets. That makes it easier for us to do the reporting. It does look like, like we're still trying to work with GASB and our auditors and again on how all that's to be implemented and also, but we've done this more or less in consultation with our external auditors as we think is the best way to try to implement this.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Sandless. I appreciate that. Council, anyone else with any questions of Mr. Boniface? Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Council President. Mr. Boniface, I want to thank you for the for the budget that you put forward. I just have a question. Could you explain contractual services for me?
Contractual services.
Oh, is that right?
What is that? No changes, 63,000. What is it under?
It's under everybody. Contractual services, telephone.
Yeah, contractual services is under everybody.
Normal stuff like that. And
Any kind of contract. It's a contract.
anything contractually that we're using. I can give you a breakdown of what that actually is distributed out of that 63.
Okay, could you give me a breakdown of each division and the added and subtracted contractual services?
Sure.
I recognize probably a common theme throughout all departments. They have some type of contractual relationship, but we we do put some money as things come up in the, but at unanticipated, but at the end of, because if we don't have it, then we can't deal with it. At the end of the fiscal year, that money rolls back into the general fund. It doesn't remain there.
Okay. Yeah, if you could just provide a list of that, that would be great. But once again, I appreciate all your hard work and dedication, and thank you for your service.
Well, nothing gets done over here alone. This is a great team to work with. So
That's right. And I yield my time back, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman Johnson. Anyone else? Mr. Wagner.
Just to dovetail on what Mr. Johnson asked for there, he was reading my mind and my notes. Mr. Boniface, if you could, while you're doing that, just look and can you tell me like an estimated savings of what you think some of the contracts for the employees that we've got, their contractual employees against what they would be if they were Hartford County employees, just that yield and savings that we think we're realizing. And then also, could you furnish what the rate of pay, the range for the pay to contractual employees is?
well, I'll have to try to figure that out, and that one probably be more complicated. You won't get that one by the end of the day today, but we'll work on that because not every department has contractual employees. So we'll go through the list. We'll figure out what where we do have it, and try to come up with something for you.
Okay, great. And that would also yield what the added contracts for employees were over last year to this year. Is that right? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Mr. Beulah.
Yes, yes, Mr. Boniface. If you could please also send me a copy of that too.
I'll send it to all of you.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beulah. Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Boniface. I guess we're up budget and efficiency next.
Well, those are divisions that fall under my oversight in the department. So I was opening up for any questions on budget efficiency. Of course, I have the chief right here for facilities and operations.
Very good. Let's go. Anyone have any questions, facility and operations? Mr. Woods.
Thank you, Mr. President. For facilities and operations, first, I think I can speak on behalf of the council saying that they've been doing a phenomenal job keeping this facility clean. Right now, every morning, they do an outstanding job. The tags on our doors saying everything's been cleaned and sterilized. Plus, I'm a little strange too. After every meeting in here, I clean everything also, but it's cleaned in the morning. How's this affecting their budget with the additional cleaning products and everything? Are we just looking at that as being recovered hopefully from the CARES Act, or is it in FEMA money possibly? Or are you guys
we were already well supplied, but as with anything that's related to the pandemic, we are tracking that for reimbursement. So she had already done a good job of having us supplied with things on hand. But if any additional purchases that we're making, we're tracking those, and we will seek reimbursement on this at some point.
Yeah, I believe facilities is doing a phenomenal job with this, so thank you for that too.
Yeah, that's over the last couple of years, we've been rotating towards a contractual arrangement on doing any of the cleaning, and that's been working very well. So our contractor has kept up with that. We still do have, because we have, take care of the employees if someone was working in there, but through retirements and leaving county government, we've been backfilling those positions contractually. It's been working well.
Thank you, Mr. Woods. Anyone else? Facilities operations? All right, government and community relations?
You have
Hi, good morning.
Good morning, Cindy Munby. How are you?
I'm just fine. Thank you very much, Mr. Council President, for having me here today. Because of the nature of how we're getting together this time around, I don't have a presentation for you. I'm here really to answer any questions. I think you all know we consider ourselves the smiling face and the helping hands of county government, and we like to be strong partners to other governmental organizations and community groups. We continue to make progress, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the budget at this time.
Thank you. Council, anyone with questions for Ms. Mumby? Seeing none, Ms. Mumby, I appreciate all you do. I appreciate the time that you spend on all the conference calls. I don't speak on many of them, but I listen in and I hear you ask very pertinent questions, and you represent the county very well and the county executive.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yes. Citizen Affairs and Agricultural Services.
Oh, well, that's all part of That's all part of the department. So if you have any questions in regards to that.
Mr. Schroeds.
I just want to commend,
Yeah, turn your mic on, Chad.
Sorry about that. I think you really found a good person in the hiring of Larry Richardson. I believe that falls under that division. I'm not positive, but I just really think he's got I don't know. He comes to the community advisory board meetings, and it just seems like he's just on his game. He always gets back to the community advisory boards, and I just think he's a great liaison. I think he's working out really well from my perspective.
Thank you. I'll pass that on.
Council, anyone else? Mr. Johnson. You unmute your mic, sir.
Good morning, Ms. Mumby. How are you?
Good morning. I'm fine. How are you, Councilman?
I'm doing well. Question. Could you talk about the reclassification of the marketing coordinator from Parks and Rec to your division?
Yeah, so Kim, I think you can talk about it from a budget standpoint, and I can talk about the rationale, and maybe I'll do that first. So as you might be aware, there are several departments that have folks who do marketing, community services is one, economic development. These are departments that are outwardly facing, but not every department has someone to do that. So rather than make multiple hires in multiple departments, we consolidated that into one position that operates under my direction, but that goes out to various departments and assists with marketing, pushing out articles, press releases. So a good example of that has been Parks and Recreation, emergency services, even water and sewer is seeing some publicity love. So we're trying to tell the good story of what we're doing with taxpayer dollars, and this position is going to help us do it more efficiently from my office than having to hire multiple people within each department.
And to add on to Ms. Mumby's comments, the county executive, since we came into office, his primary directive has no new positions. And you'll see over the last 5 years, there have been no new positions in county government. In Parks and Rec, we have been transitioning over to a lot of the maintenance division to do things contractually. And so there's several vacancies that exist in there. So you'll see for the ambulance crew, primarily most of those came from Parks and Rec. This is a vacancy that we had in Parks and Rec that we're doing those services contractually now. And so we moved that over to accomplish what the county executive is directed, to not add any positions, but still provide a pin to this one.
And so, could you explain, I believe it's what, 95,000? 95,000. So that 95,000 is for that position. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's correct. It's salary.
I wish I had two or three screens here because I'm jumping back and forth. I'm sorry.
That would cover the salary, the benefits, pension, FICA. Yes, that's the whole package.
Okay.
Covers everything.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Anyone else? See, Mr. Wagner?
Just a quick question. How many employees are under Office of Community, Governmental and Community Relations?
Yeah, I think it's 7 full-time classified positions.
7 full.
Mhm.
And then what is there, a couple of part-time or
Yes,
contractual?
some part-time.
A part-time?
Yes.
Okay. And one question that I get asked at a lot of events when certainly you have a booth out and things are being handed out, can you tell me what category or what the dollar amount is for a lot of the I call them freebies that the county gives out? Can you give me a dollar amount or tell me where that category is? That's in your budget, right?
Yes, some of it is in her budget. I can get that to you.
Would you please?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. All right, thanks. I'm good.
Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, Council President. Another question. Citizens Affairs, they've had in their budget about 35,000, maybe 30,000 in their budget for management services and other professional services, but only used about $1,100. So could you explain that, and could that be reduced?
When you say only use, you mean during which budget? Because, that is there.
The FY20.
Okay. So maybe in FY20, we put that in there for unanticipated expenditures that come up. I can give you a breakdown. We probably have spent very little in some years, and it's rolled back into the general fund at the end of the year. There might be some years that we've had to spend it. And, so it's there. If it's not there, then we can't deal with whatever comes up that, we won't have the funding to deal with. So, you'll see that as a common theme. There's a lot of things, and you can see in your CAFR, that's done by the external auditor. It gives the actuals at the end of the year when the books are closed, and it shows that a significant amount of money every year goes back into the general fund because we operate on budget to budget, but if that money's not used, it's returned back. But if we don't have that money available, then we can't deal with that issue.
Okay, but you can provide a breakdown for me, correct?
I can provide a breakdown on what we have spent in the past, maybe the past several years, what we've spent on.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Again, anyone else? Thank you, Ms. Mumby. Appreciate it. So I guess this will take us up to a break. As you said, Mr. Boniface, we moved through this fairly quick. Appreciate your willingness to come with us here today. So at this time, we'll recess and we'll reconvene at 2:00.